All right, so this is the second video for Thursday. And what I did was I went back and I looked at like the last 18 or 19 years of AP essays to like 2001, 2002 to see if we have any examples that go with the topics that we've been talking about. Remember, for years, there's been a big essay question number one, and then essay questions two and three were some minor topic like bank and balance sheet or absolute and comparative advantage. Obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time on those two topics. A lot of people think a bank and balance sheet is front and center this year. Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you in the cold, and so we'll work on that. So my strategy's always been for my kids to have as good a multiple choice score as they could get and a strong essay number one. So by the time they get to essay number one, they've got a three. And then in most colleges gives you full college credit, the state universities anyway. In Euro, you need a four before it really counts. In a lot of your courses, you do that. But anyway, that was my strategy. So this year, the strategy's been a kind of upended, and we think what used to be the question number one is going to be question number two. So we think question one is going to be the majority of your score, and we think it's going to be from a lot of these ancillary topics, which is why I'm spending time on things like the four factors of production. I don't think they're that important. Neither are positive or normative statements, but we don't know how important it's going to be. So I want to leave no stone unturned. Anyway, I hope you are doing well, enjoying this rainy weather. I hope you're doing okay up here and down here. I'm a lot older than you guys, and I've got a lot more living under my belt. Literally, I've got a lot more belly under my belt. But the deal is, I find that I do best in life is I'm a type A personality. When I set the alarm and I get up in the morning, over the summers when I used to just sleep all the time, it did not work out well for me. It threw off my whole system. When I was your age, I would have slept probably till noon, then stayed up all night. But anyway, hope you got yourself on a good system. Hope you're feeling good. I'm feeling great. My wife and I've been married for 32 years, and me being stuck with her in this house for like, what is it, 4 weeks now, has been wonderful. I clearly married well. I hope she says the same thing about me. But anyway, I'm reading. I'm watching TV. There's a series of books called the Saxon Chronicles. I've read all 12 of them. Well, Netflix, they're so popular in England, they filmed them. And there's a show called Last Kingdom. And last night I finished the second season. It's wonderful. I don't recommend it to you because there's a whole lot of killing and some other stuff in there. But anyway, I hope you got a system. I hope you're using your time wisely and doing things that you staying in contact with your family, your friends. Anyway, we're going to move on and do some economics here. When I went back through all these essays, I only found three essays. Three. I do that a lot. I'll say two and hold up four fingers. Needless to say, I'm not a math teacher. I only found three essays that apply to these topics. Anyway, let's go on here. And what I'm going to expect you to do is pause the video and try to answer them on your own. Then I'll go over the answers. So here's the first one. And so again, let me see. Let me move this over. Let's, it's for 2006. So let's pause it and then answer the questions. Okay, unpause it. All right. So year 2006, do these things go into GDP? All right, the value of a used textbook sold through an online auction in 2006. No. Whatever year the book was published, remember, not sold, it was when it was produced. The year it was produced is the year it went into GDP. Now, GDP has not grown any. Now, if you were paying a commission to somebody working in that store that sold it, yes, their salary would go into GDP. The actual value of the textbook, no. Rent paid in 2006. I had to go look this one up because you rarely think about rent. But rent is considered a service. And so the fact that the building was built in 2000 has nothing to do with rent. You're paying for the service of someone letting you live in their building. And so, yes, this would go into GDP. Now, notice here, you have to explain your answers. So I'm very likely to give you a question like this tomorrow, where you are asked a question, does this go into GDP? And you say yes or no, and you have to explain it. Commissions earned in 2006 by a stockbroker. I'm so glad I went over this in the example, during the lecture. Remember, when you buy or sell stock, that does not go into GDP, but the stockbroker's commission does. He or she has provided a service to you. They gave you access to the stock exchange and facilitated your trade. So commissions earned by a stockbroker would go into GDP. Also, a used car salesman. A used car being sold does not go into GDP, but the salesman's commission, because he or she has provided a service, does go into GDP. The value of automobiles produced in 2006 in South Korea by a firm fully owned by U.S. citizens. Well, if you look at the top, we're talking about the GDP for the United States. So the answer is no. Why? It was made in another country. Now, it would go into South Korea's GDP, but not ours. Anyway, expect a question like this tomorrow where you have to say yes or no, and then you have to explain why. All right, question number 2. Let me shift this up over here. All right. Assume the country of Fisherland produces only consumer goods and capital goods. Anyway, I want you to pause it and try it on your own. Okay, we're back. So the graph shows the PPC or PPF for Fisherland. Anyway, the graph, the line bows out. It's like it bows out. So that shows increasing opportunity costs for both goods. Okay. Redraw the graph given above. Show a point that represents fully employed, efficiently used resources. Remember, one of the biggest resources out there is human beings and their labor. And you see that fully employed. What that they're hinting at there is the U.S. or the country of Fisherland is at full employment, which means the only types of people that are unemployed are frictional and structural. And it's supposed to be that way. There is no cyclical unemployment. So when you draw the graph, the point there, point A, would be right on the line, okay? Not outside it and not inside it. Okay, assume there's a recession. Label point C. That would be a point inside the curve. Now I'm going to go ahead and do D and E, even though we haven't reviewed them yet. Identify a fiscal policy action. If you remember way back when I talked about fiscal policy, it's 3 things. Increase or decrease government spending, which is the easy one, just like buy or sell T-bills and monetary policy. Increase or decrease government spending. Increase or decrease tax rates, income taxes. Increase or decrease transfer payments. Remember, taxes is the one that goes the other way. So if you were in a recession, the easiest fiscal policy action would be to say, increase government spending. You could also say decrease taxes, or you could say increase transfer payments. Okay. E, assume instead that no discretionary means the federal government did it. Assume the government doesn't do anything. Now this is a issue here for E, this idea that the economy fixes itself. I'm going to put the quotes up here. You've heard me talk about that before and the difference between classical economists and Keynesian economists. This was not a mistake on my part, but this was one of the major topics that I really should have covered the first 9 weeks that I didn't. I did plenty more. So you are in pretty good shape for if you can remember everything you learned before spring break, you're in pretty good shape, but I did not talk about this. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you the answer to E, even though we really haven't covered it yet. So if we were in a recession, wages would be low. There'd be people unemployed and wages would be low. Okay. So what happens is if the government doesn't do anything, wages being low is actually good for businesses because they can hire people cheaper. And so what happened is, the salaries of individuals going down, sucks for them, but it's good for businesses. So this would have the SRAS shift to the right or increase. Anyway, it takes a while because wages are sticky. We did talk a little bit about that. Do not worry, I will make sure that we go over that. Okay, going on to the next one. All right, so before you pause it, don't worry about doing A. That's absolute and comparative advantage. And believe me, the 2 things we're going to spend a lot of time on before you get to this test are absolute and comparative advantage. Remember, that is the most challenging thing for me to teach. And when I went back through all these essays from like the last 18 years, there were numerous absolute and comparative advantage questions. There were also numerous bank and balance sheet questions. And so we will spend plenty of time on that. All right, so skip the first one, but do the rest. Pause it. Okay, unpause it. Here we go. So there's a bunch of information here in this table. There's employed, frictionally unemployed, structurally unemployed, cyclically unemployed, and then not in the labor force. Well, there's only 3 types of unemployment, and there they are. If you add them together, they're 20,000 people. Okay, so here is the formula. I'm not going to stop it and put a graphic up. You can look at your notes. You can just write this down. The formula to calculate unemployment is the number of unemployed, that's on the top, the numerator, divided by the labor force, that's the denominator. Now, who's in the labor force? Who's in the labor force is the employed by the government's way of measuring that, and the unemployed by the government's way of measuring that. So, what number goes on the top? 20,000. What number goes on the bottom? Well, you see there the employed is 180,000. So that goes on the bottom, plus the unemployed, which is 20,000. So it's going to be 20,000 divided by 200,000. And the answer is 10%. And you have to show your work. Tomorrow I'm going to make you show your work as well. And then the second one says calculate the labor force participation rate. Now this is the 2018. The thing what you see in the bottom there, these are the years these were on the essays. My kids got this a couple years ago, and I had talked about all this stuff. Unfortunately, I had not, because this is essay 3, as you can see. Remember, my goal is to get them ready for essay 1. I had not done enough of essay number 2 and number 3, and this was one that was kind of tough for them. Obviously, we had done absolute and comparative advantage, and we had done the unemployment rate, but they were unprepared for C, and it's very tricky because there's different definitions for labor force participation rate. But here is the way the government figures that. It's the number of people in your labor force. And we already know what that is based on the last question. Your labor force is 200,000. It's the people in the labor force divided by the country's population. So 200,000 would go on the top. What would go on the bottom would be 200,000 plus 100,000, which is 300,000. 200,000 divided by 300,000, 66.6% or 67%. Question D, draw, says, here we go with the PPF. Draw a PPF, blah, 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 and label a point Z that reflects the current level of unemployment. I referred to this in the last question. Because there is cyclical unemployment, that means the country is in a recession. If they had 15,000 in type 1 and type 2, but none in type 3, the country would be at full employment. It'd be on the line. But because there is cyclical unemployment, there's a recession. So point Z goes inside the line. And that's the 3 problems I have. I'm going to try to tell you roughly how tomorrow is going to work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send that out. What we'll do, and we'll probably start about 11 or noon, somewhere in there. I'll figure this out. And I'm going to put like 8 of you at a time into a Zoom room, a Zoom discussion group, whatever you want to call it. And so you'll be able to see me, and I'll be able to see all 8 of you. Now, I want you to have your notes out. Okay, that's legit. And I want you to have a calculator. At least tomorrow, I'm assuming you can use a calculator. So you can have your notes and a calculator. I do not, you can have your phone, and you'll see why in just a minute. So what's going to happen is I get 8 of you in the chat room, and then I will post your question into Canvas. Okay, so you'll go into Canvas. So you're going to have your computer and your phone. On your computer, you're going to see the problem. And then you're going to write down the answers. And I will be able to, you're going to have your phone sitting there. That's part of the Zoom chat. I'll be able to see where you're, what you're doing. And I'm going to probably give you 10 minutes, and we'll try and make them kind of short. So some of you are absolutely going to run out of time. That's the way the AP exam is probably going to work. I'm expecting the College Board to have 30 or 40 different questions. And so, and they claim, they'll know if you Google. I don't know how they're going to know. That they will know if you cheat or whatever. So the deal is I'm going to give you a time limit. And so you need to have as much of this stuff up here as you can, so you don't need to look at your notes. Anyway, if you have any questions today, you can email me. Now, don't email me at Remind. Email me at Jerry, jerry.russell@ocps.net. Remember, anything in these 5 lectures that I've done, I guess this is the 6th, can be used on the essays tomorrow. Okay? And again, I hope you're having a good day. I hope you're reading a book, watching your favorite TV shows, and playing Video games. My son, the video game designer, bought me Left 4 Dead one year.